Okay, so let's look at the condo rider that's currently being used in Florida in 2025. It's a 4-page document that gets attached to your like 18, 19, 20-page underlying contract to purchase the condo. I'm going to quickly go over the important terms to pay attention to. So this first paragraph just talks about whether or not the association's approval is required, is or is not required. You check a box. It's important to do. Usually you're going to say is required because I really don't know of any condos in South Florida where condo approval is not required. So this thing says it is required, and then it sets forth the obligations, the timing, how fast the buyer has to submit the application. It's at the buyer's expense generally, unless you negotiate that. So just know that there's an approval process, which involves an application, fees, background check, credit check, association, time, and meetings to approve you as a buyer. The second paragraph goes over whether or not the condo has the right of first refusal. They either do or do not have a right of first refusal in the condo. Most condos don't, but some of them do. And they kind of are still around because the primary times that I've seen it used, because usually these associations don't want to buy a unit, they want them to keep circulating and keep the inventory moving. But the one time I saw it happen where the condo association had the right and exercised the right of first refusal was when a guy went into a building that was pretty nicely priced and he got like a bargain, like 50% discount. So say for instance, you're going into a $600,000 building where those units typically sell for 600 and you're getting a deal for like 250. The condo association might come in, exercise their right of first refusal so that you can't buy that property so cheap and affect the other condo unit owner's value. There might be other circumstances where the condo association would exercise the right of first refusal, and if that box is checked that they have it, then you need to investigate what all the requirements are. Paragraph 3, fees, assessments, prorations, and litigation. So this is the part of the condo disclosure that they give you that sets forth how much your condo fees are, and whether they're paid monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, annually, how much. If there's more than one association, how much do you have to pay to that one, and how frequent. And if there's a recreation lease, then how much that will cost and how often it needs to be paid. There are still some buildings with recreation leases. The other thing to ask about, I'm kind of going off the addendum here a little bit, is when you're looking back on rules and regulations and the financial solvency or condition of the condo, is like on these newer ones, what we're seeing on new construction and newer construction, the mixed use, you might have the whole first floor, it might have a couple of restaurants, a couple of shops, clothing stores, tourist stores, bars, restaurants, whatever they're leasing out, the commercial space that they're leasing out on the first floor. If you're buying in there, you want to know who gets that rent. Is the developer getting that rent, and for how long? Or is that rent going into the condo association's budget? Of course, it's better to buy in a building where the association is getting that commercial rent to offset the residents' contribution to maintain the building. That was just a little off thing there. A condo rider continued. It just talks about who pays, what fees, and then it says if it's a homeowner association, that's a different rider, that's a different animal. People call these fees HOA fees. It's not HOA fees, it's COA fees if you want to put initials to it. It's condo association, condo owner association, not homeowner association. So walk the walk and talk the talk. Now this paragraph C here in sub C in paragraph 3 talks about the special assessments. So this is where the seller makes representation as to whether or not there have been any assessments or there are any coming, including whether an assessments or costs have been discussed on the agenda, reported in the minutes of the association within 12 months before you sign the contract. So you're entitled to 12 months of those minutes so that you can trust. If they say no assessment's coming, trust it, but verify and get agendas and minutes of the meetings for the year preceding the date you're signing this contract. And then they're talking about if there are special assessments levied, who's paying that, the buyer or the seller? And notice that if this is left blank, if you forget to check a box, then the buyer pays. So, which kind of makes sense, because if there's a recent assessment, it's probably for stuff that's in process or soon will be done. So the buyer's really going to get the benefit of that work being paid for through the assessment. You also need to ask if there has been an assessment, or if then is it paid off in full in a lump sum, or is the condo association getting a loan, like to pay the roofer $4 million, for instance, and then are all the owners paying those loan payments? So sometimes they're stretched out in loan payments on a loan taken out by the association with the consent of the owners, of course. And sometimes they're just, bam, you got to pay it. I mean, there are condos down here that are getting assessed for maintenance or improvements of the condo building or the condo property, $45,000, $200,000. Lots of money. These assessments can be pretty big ticket items. So you really want to check into them. Sprinkler system retrofit. If the condo voted to forego retrofitting, because when the requirement to put in commercial sprinkler systems, especially into these old condos, came out by statute a few years back, the condos were allowed to opt out of that. So if they voted to forego retrofitting or opting out on sprinkler system or handrails and guardrails, then prior to closing, the seller must furnish to buyer the written notice of the association's vote to forego the retrofitting. So yeah, that gives you proof that they opted out, but stay tuned for the future, because the Florida legislature is always working and knee-jerk reacting. Now here we have the disclosures, so non-developer disclosure, which is you as a seller selling. So you're disclosing, and the buyer is acknowledging receipt of current copy of the Declaration of Condominium, Articles of Incorporation, bylaws, rules and regulations, copy of the most recent annual financial statement and annual budget, and frequently asked questions and answers. So the seller has to give all of those things to the buyer. And if they did it, you check the box that the buyer hereby acknowledges receipt. If you don't have it all together and you didn't give it to the buyer yet, the buyer's going to check this box. And this box says the buyer has the right to cancel this agreement by delivering notice of intent to cancel within 3 days, excluding blah, 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 of receipt of those documents. So if you as a seller never give those basic documents to a buyer, they have the right to cancel that contract up until the day of closing. So as a seller, I think you should pull all of these documents together and give them to your listing agent so you're ready to deliver them as soon as you're under contract, so you can start that 3-day clock ticking. If you're a buyer and you didn't get it, and then later on you decide you don't care, for some crazy reason you don't want to buy in that anymore, this could be your excuse to cancel that contract. I didn't get the documents, I want to cancel. It actually happened. I got a guy out of a contract that he was buying from a developer, and he came to me. I didn't negotiate the contract for him or anything. This is when I was practicing law about probably 20 years ago, and this was all you had to provide. He never received any of these He came to me and said, I want to cancel this contract. I don't like this condo anymore for whatever reason. And I went right to this paragraph. I said, did you get these documents? He said, no, I don't know what you're talking about. So I canceled the contract, and it was like 2 days before closing. And they had to cancel it and give him his money back. So, I mean, this bold print capitalized language is very important. If you in any contract see something in bold print and capitalized, it's important. And the legislature makes them do it. They don't do it because they want to, or because they're nice guys, because they feel like typing in caps. Buyer's request for documents. This is where you make the request. You either request or don't request the documents. Don't ever check don't request the documents. You want to see them. There is a lot to look at when you're buying a condo in Florida. Paragraph 8, common elements. This is where you're going to be very specific on what parking spaces are included, how many of them, if they have numbers, the numbers. If there's a garage, what's the number? Other could be your storage unit. What's the number? What's the location? You want to be specific about these common elements that you really get exclusive use for. Now, look at this paragraph 10. This is quite the paragraph. So this is the new one. This is the new part of the rider. So before you only had to give the bylaws, condo docs, these basic documents here. Now you have to give those to your buyer, or the buyer needs to request not only those documents, but also milestone inspection reports, structural integrity reserve study, and a turnover inspection reports. Now these are triggered on condos that are more than 30 years old. So you have to have these reports done at the 30-year point from the date of certificate of occupancy, I believe, and then every 10 years thereafter. So this is in response to the Surfside tragedy, and it is adding quite a bit of expense and obligation on condo associations. You as the seller are absolutely entitled to request these from the condo association, and they have to give it to you so that you can give it to the buyer so that everybody knows what the condition of the condo is and really whether it's safe. So the milestone inspection. So when you get to each report, you have the milestone inspection, turnover inspection report, and the structural integrity reserve study. You have to check only one option in every one of those subparagraphs. So the option you're going to pick, your choices are the milestone inspection or turnover or structural is required and has been completed, or it's not required, or it's required but it hasn't been completed yet. So you got to pick one, whatever the situation is. They all have the same thing. Is required. This turnover inspection report has a date in it. It tracks the statute. Is required, is not required, is required but hasn't been done. Same thing with structural integrity reserve study. Is required and has been completed, is not required, is required but hasn't been done. You need to fill these out accurately, and if they're there, then you need to provide them to the buyer so the buyer can look at it. Now you may be wondering, when is it not required? If the condo is less than 3 stories, or if it's less than 30 years old. Everything else, you're going to need it. And if you don't have it from your condo association, you absolutely have the right to obtain a copy. Now we're going to get into still that paragraph 10, which talks about all these new reports, really for everyone's safety. Now we got a word salad here in front of us. So another box, buyer received all these reports, or this didn't yet, so this agreement is voidable by delivering notice, 3 days notice after receipt of these reports. So again, if you're the seller, get it to the buyer ASAP so you can start that 3-day clock running. If you're the buyer, you want to have it. So you must have it. Look at this word salad. It's cray-cray. I've actually read this a few times, and I still need to read it more times and cross-reference back to the statute. There's a lot in here, so pay attention. And then the disclosure summary. So buyer acknowledges all of the following. The condo may have minimal common elements. Portions of the building may be governed by a separate recorded instrument. So you need to request a whole lot of documents outside of this rider to help you make an informed decision as to whether or not you want to buy this apartment in this building in this location. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and you're pretty well acquainted with the 7 reasons to buy a condo in Florida and the 10 considerations that you should take into account when you're buying a condo. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. So don't forget, subscribe, hit the bell with the notifications, hit me up in the comments, and feel free to call me, WhatsApp me, email me, any way that you like to communicate, reach out, and I'm happy to discuss the topics in this video, any other video, or maybe you have ideas for a future video. If you have something that you want to know about real estate in Florida, I'm your girl. Let me know in the comments or send me an email or a text. And I'm always looking for ideas. All right. So thanks again. And I bid you adieu, says.